Assalamualaikum. I am Faisal Detomanong. Today I will discuss dilemma zone. First is the introduction. The fundamental problem, the dilemma with dilemma zone is a lack of rigor with regard to defining terminology and the documenting of assumptions with discussing dilemma zones. This makes it difficult to have an informed discussions of issues. Further, it creates poor practice because practitioners often resort to standard practice, what the industry has always done, or status quo because of potential liability and because practitioners do not understand the inconsistent use of terms. Here, the term standard practice denotes things like past agency practices that cannot be explained or documented, or practices that do not reflect a modern understanding of complex issues. Type of dilemma zones. Type 1 dilemma zones. Type 1 dilemma zones deals with the period of time during which a driver either proceeds through the intersection because she is too close to stop, or stops because he or she can safely do so. As originally formulated by gases, the yellow indication needed to be long enough for a vehicle to either stop or clear the intersection as shown in Figure 1. At the time, this was consistent with the ITE recommended practice. This is the Figure 1, gases formulation, stopping and clearing. Figure 2 shows the Type 1 dilemma zone, which corresponds with the timing of the change period. If the change period is time according to the Traffic Engineering Handbook 5th edition, a Type 1 dilemma zone does not exist because, based on the assumed parameters, a vehicle can either safely stop or clear the intersection. In this case, the driver is not placed in dilemma caused by a short yellow plus clearance. There are some important caveats to observe related to the Type 1 dilemma. The formula is based on the sound laws of physics. However, the formula is only as good as the assumed parameters because drivers vary is their performance. The issue of human factors differences can alter the situation, which leads to the second type of dilemma zone discussed in the next section. It should be the ASTO guidance as reflected in the Green Book uses criteria that are different from ITE. Furthermore, the research on which all the criteria are based is very old. This has resulted in the wide variety of opinion and practice presently employed regarding sign timing for Type 1 dilemma zone. The Figure 2, Type 1 dilemma zone. Type 2 dilemma zone. Type 2 dilemma zone has also been called indecision zones, and the option zones reflecting their probabilistic nature. As a group, drivers within a few seconds travel time of the intersection tends to be indecisive about their ability to stop at the onset of the yellow indication. This behavior yields a zone of indecision in advance of stop line which some drivers may proceed and others may stop. Figure 3 shows the location of this Type 2 dilemma zone. The Figure 3 Type 2 dilemma zone. The Type 2 dilemma zone has been defined in several ways. Ziegler defined in terms of distance from the stop line. He defined the beginning of the Type 2 dilemma zone as the distance beyond which 90% of all drivers will stop if presented with a yellow indication. He defined ends of the zone as the distance within which only 10% of all drivers will stop. The distance to the beginning of Type 2 dilemma zone recommended by Ziegler corresponds to about 5%, about 5 seconds of travel time. The beginning of the Type 2 dilemma zone, as contained in guidance developed by the Southern District of Institute of Transportation Engineers, varies from 4.2 to 5.2 seconds of travel time, with the larger value corresponding to higher speeds. The Type 2 dilemma zone has also been defined as the observed travel width to the stop line. Chang et al. In 1985 found that 85% of drivers stop if they were more than 3 seconds from the stop line, regardless of their speed. Similarly, research found that drivers less than 2 seconds from the stop line would almost always continue through the intersection. Based on the research data, all of which was gathered at least 20 years ago, the beginning and end of the Type 2 dilemma zone tends to be about 5.5 seconds and 2.5 seconds, respectively, from the stop line. These times equate to decision times of 90th and 10th percentile drivers, respectively. The Type 2 dilemma zone exists at the onset of every yellow indication. Regardless of the yellow interval duration, exposure to the Type 2 dilemma zone is minimized through the design of the detection system and the associated signal timing parameters. While detection, design, and timing is beyond the scope of the paper, some basic principles can be established. The summary and the conclusions. Understanding the two types of dilemma zone is essential for good traffic signal operation and safety. Type 1 dilemma zones are addressed by the selection of appropriate yellow change and red clearance intervals. Type 2 dilemma zones are addressed by the proper design of the detection system and appropriate selection of controller timing parameters.